Okay, that's it. All right. So thank you, Dr. Guta, for joining us in this conversation. I want to briefly introduce Dr. Guta. Dr. Guta completed his PhD at Durham University in the UK. And after completing his PhD, Dr. Guta spent a year at Durham University as a postdoctoral research fellow within the Durham Emergence Project, set up with cooperation between physicists and philosophers, and this was funded by the John Templeton Foundation. His postdoctoral research was focused on the nature of the emergence of phenomenal consciousness taken from the standpoint of metaphysics, philosophy of mind, neuroscience, and quantum physics. So thank you very much, Dr. Guta, for joining us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. So today's topic is basically the following. We will be talking a little bit about consciousness, about maybe some introductory points to the philosophy of the mind. And then I want to jump into Neuralink. What's Neuralink? What's Elon Musk doing in this ambitious project? And after that, I would like to make some connections between what's the relationship between consciousness, what Elon Musk is doing, and what sorts of implications does this have for Christianity? Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Guta. So the first question is about consciousness. I know that consciousness is a very wide and a very big word. I know that not every philosopher holds the same definition of consciousness, let's say, but I would like to get your insights on what is consciousness and how is consciousness related to the brain?
Excellent question. And consciousness really comes in different shapes and sizes in terms of how we try to understand what consciousness is. As we speak, actually, there are a number of definitions that people really have proposed as to what consciousness is, the concept of consciousness or the phenomenon that we call consciousness. So look, let's say, let me throw out, 1, 2, 3, 4 different kinds of kind of ways of understanding what consciousness is. So there is a kind of a rudimentary notion of consciousness, let's say intransitive notion of consciousness, where you are awake. You're just awake. Nothing, surprising about it. You wake up from a sleep and you're just minding your own business. So that kind of intransitive consciousness is also a kind of consciousness that's also true of animals. If you have a dog, your dog is conscious of you, conscious of its surroundings, and so on. So that's a kind of a not very complicated, not very philosophically intriguing aspect of consciousness. But we also talk about consciousness, let's say, a transitive notion of consciousness, where you are aware of not only like just your surrounding, but you are aware of objects around you as being, let's say, a table, as being a car, as being human beings, and so on. You can actually distinguish, differentiate objects that are around you, and you can actually identify them, you can differentiate them, and so on. That is a kind of consciousness that's very complicated kind of consciousness. So that kind of consciousness, transitive kind of consciousness, transitive notion of consciousness can be linked to what we call the most difficult, at the same time, very interesting aspect of consciousness. Consciousness researchers talk about, let's say, phenomenal consciousness. Phenomenal consciousness is entirely grounded in subjective experience. And you know what it is like to be, let's say, in a pain state. You know what it is like to be in a headache state. You know what it's like to be, let's say, if you are a coffee lover like me, when you sip a coffee, you just know what it is like to have that kind of taste sensation that coffee actually gives you. So it's pretty unique to you. I cannot put myself in your shoes and literally taste coffee in the exact same way that you taste coffee and get the same kind of sensation. But it's just person relative, but it's highly, highly subjective. So that's the version or the feature of consciousness that keeps many philosophers or researchers of consciousness awake late at night, including myself, because we don't know how phenomenal consciousness is connected to the nervous system. We know that there is a relationship to the nervous system, because if your nervous system malfunctions, for example, it disrupts your consciousness or conscious awareness or the way you experience things and so on. There will be a disintegration of experience and fragmentation of experience. So we know that there is something deeper going on between, let's say, your brain and consciousness. The only problem that we're facing is we are not yet in a position to precisely tell what's the nature of this relationship and a way that actually consciousness itself is even distinct from brain states or brain activities. So many people happen to think that it is part and parcel of brain activity, but we haven't yet figured out how and in what way consciousness is part of the brain activity. If you are a physicalist, you can simply reduce consciousness or conscious awareness or this phenomenon that we call consciousness, nothing but a higher level of brain activity. And it's very, very unique from, let's say, spikes inside your brain, electrical spikes or electricity or neurotransmitters and so on. But it's a higher level of brain function, and we haven't yet unraveled the mystery, but it's nothing to be surprised about it. Many people are dissatisfied with that answer. And I think it seems like consciousness, phenomenal consciousness, which is completely subjective, is very mysterious, and it's grounded in first-person perspective. We haven't yet actually come up with any successful scientific or philosophical model that really helps us to absolutely crack the nut and say this is exactly what it is and this is how it's related to the brain and so on. So phenomenal consciousness is one of the most mysterious aspect of consciousness and one of the most familiar aspect of consciousness as well. So you and I are now conscious and the listeners are conscious. You literally know that what it is to be a conscious human being. But ask yourself how this conscious phenomenon is related to the brain, or what exactly is it? Try to ask those kinds of metaphysical questions, and you'll soon find out how difficult it is to wrap your mind around, even if it is deeply familiar, because you know what it is like to look at a bright day, sunny day, and an ocean, the sound that the ocean makes, roaring, the waves that come out of this ocean. It takes you by surprise. That's what we mean by phenomenal consciousness. There's what it is like for me to be in a certain kind of state, in a disturbing state in the case of headache, or some sort of pain, agonizing pain. It's kind of makes you feel uncomfortable and so on. You know what it is like to be in that state. How's that experience actually related to the brain, and what's the contribution of the brain? We know in neuroscience to a great extent when the brain malfunctions, yes, you will malfunction as well, you the person, but that's exactly where the research is really going on, and we'll talk about how Neuralink is related to this later on. But yeah, consciousness, we have over 29 different definitions of consciousness. Okay, that's what we're talking about. It comes in so many different dresses and sizes. But having said that, to your listeners, phenomenal consciousness, what it is like to be in different kinds of states, is the aspect of consciousness that's the most interesting, the most difficult for both philosophers and neuroscientists to explain it to anyone's satisfaction. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, following this line of thought, you mentioned several things, and we talked about consciousness as what it is like to be in some kinds of states. And there's a famous philosopher that used this term, the what it is like to be something. And I think he argues that this is Thomas Nagel, and I think he argues that because of this definition, we can also say that some animals even have like a sort of consciousness, because a bat knows what it is like to be a bat or something like that. Can we say that animals have
Oh,
consciousness
yeah, okay.
in some level?
Thomas Nagel, yes, Thomas Nagel in 1970s, he introduced a phrase called "What it is like to be a bat." So he has an article by that title. He didn't he didn't say that the bat knows what it is like to be a bat, but it will be difficult for us to know what it is like to be a bat, right? So you are a human being. So suppose a scenario where you literally want to know what it is like to be a bat. The bat's experience, backed up by biological mechanism that's unique to the bat, okay? You would not be able to bring yourself to a position, no matter how well you study the physiology of a bat, for example. It doesn't matter how well you understand the physical underpinning mechanism of how the bat actually kind of functions. You will not be able to have the subjective aspect of a bat's experience. Okay, so for Thomas Nagel, he is really trying to show us the gap between third-person analysis of something and first-person subjective experience, which is unique to the object in question. So he used that phrase to show us how phenomenal consciousness is entirely, thoroughly subjective. If it is subjective, then your subjective experience cannot be represented by my subjective experience and vice versa. For example, in your family, think of a person who you admire a lot and who you love a lot, who you take care of like a lot. Let's say that person, God forbid, became ill, very seriously ill. Look, no matter how much your heart goes out for that person, you can never be justified in saying that I know how that person is feeling. I know what's going on in that person's body. You can't say that. You can simply, pour out your heart. You wish all the best for that person to get well. You help that person get medical help and so on, but you will never be able to be an expert. You will never be able to tell me what it is like for that person to be in that kind of state at that given time. So there is a gulf. So for Thomas Nagel, look, the bat, as far as we know, I don't think the bat has a second order capacity to reflect on itself and say, look, I'm a bat. Oh, wow, it's great to be a bat, and so on. I don't think a bat has that kind of capacity, but you do have, as a human being, that kind of capacity because you have a capacity for self-concept, right? So as far as we know, we are the only species who are capable of having and demonstrating and showing this second order capacity. We literally think about ourselves. Like I can think about Mihretu, I can think about myself. I have self-concept. I'm not a brute human being, but think of your own dog. Do you think your dog has, a self-concept such as, I'm a dog. Oh, I'm a beautiful dog. It's great to be a dog and so on. I don't think animals have that kind of capacity. Animals simply literally explore their environment with immensely complicated capacities. A dog actually sniffs scent miles away, but you can't do that as a human being. They have this discriminative capacities. If you take police dogs, for example, at the airport, for instance, when they sniff for something, for drugs or something like that, we human beings don't have that capacity, but dogs do have that capacity. In their physiology, that is there. It's inbuilt stuff. You have to simply train them. They can sniff, scent, they can distinguish that, and so on. But I don't think they have a concept of scent, a concept of, the ability to sniff something, a concept of being a dog serving America as an American citizen, and so on. All these complicated capacities are unique to us, but they are not unique to animals. But animals can actually perform at a much higher level than we do perform in certain areas, okay? But the consciousness, the phenomenal consciousness that we're talking about is exclusively like grounded in first person perspective, and it actually requires you have to have a capacity to reflect on your own performance and something like that. So I don't think that capacity is available for other animals, but you can still train animals to perform amazing tricks and so on and so forth. But that's not a justification. That's not evidence. That doesn't really show that they have this second order complicated capacity that only human beings seems to be in a position to demonstrate. So Thomas Nagel's idea is really kind of motivated to show us this truth, not necessarily to show us that, oh, a bat knows what it is like to be a bat. Well, if he had said that, so what would have been his evidence? Like, we can't interview a bat. A bat is not going to tell us back, oh, yeah, I know what it's like to be a bat. But it's an excellent example. What it is like to be a bat, how to function like a bat is literally completely unique to bat, right? So the bat, even if it lacks second order capacity, can operate on the basis of first order capacity, which means being a bat, doing a bat thing, and so on. So that's the idea of Thomas Nagel's argument.
Okay, thank you. So because we have these second order capacities to do things like reflect on ourselves, is this enabled because consciousness is itself our property, or is consciousness something that instantiates properties?
Excellent question. Recently, I don't know if you had seen this book, Minding the Brain.
Oh,
I'll send you I have two chapters in this book that came out in 2023. One of the chapters that I wrote was on mirror neurons, and the other chapter is literally answering the very question that you asked me. Mm-hmm. What kind of property is consciousness? That's mm-hmm. the title of my article. What kind of property is consciousness? Or in what sense is consciousness a property? So the entire chapter tries to answer that question. So I go at a much deeper level, all the metaphysical properties that we talk about, like universals and tropes and so on, all the views around properties. I explore all of those doctrines of properties or notions of properties in metaphysics, and ask, like, can we fit consciousness in one of those models? Can we, for example, understand consciousness as a universal? Let's say the property of redness. Let's say a red object instantiates the property of redness. Redness can manifest itself in multiple locations at the same time. So the question for the ancient philosophers was, do we have only numerically one redness, or do we have multiple rednesses instantiated by particular objects in multiple locations? So we have two major answers, right? As Platonists and Aristotelians generally say, yes, numerically one redness can be in multiple locations all at the same time. And other people deny that. Nope. Any given object, any red object has its own redness. And another red object cannot and will not share its redness with another red object. So if you have two red objects, we have two distinct rednesses, okay? Not one single redness shared by two different objects. So the debate continues. other philosophers even deny the existence of properties, such as Quine, for example, denies that properties do not exist. And the language of property is nothing more than linguistic game and so on. Okay, we don't have to get into the complicated stuff, but in my paper, in my chapter, I completely came to a conclusion that we cannot understand consciousness as a property as we would understand, other properties such as redness, brownness, or pinkness, or some like that. Consciousness resists all models of properties because it is thoroughly subjective property. It is a property, but it's not a property like a redness is a property. It's not a property like brownness is a property, or blackness is a property, or whiteness is a property, and so on. But it is a property, but unique kind of property. It's a property which is thoroughly subjective, cannot actually exist, independent of subjects that bear that property. In other words, I cannot point to consciousness in my living room. You cannot say to me, oh, that cute consciousness, oh my goodness, it's better than my consciousness. We can't say that. Consciousness necessarily requires a conscious being. A conscious being and consciousness cannot be isolated from each other. If you're not conscious, you're in deep trouble. Deep trouble. Basically, by the way, we can just broadly speaking, if you're not conscious, then we're not even sure that you are alive. I mean, maybe you're dead, right? So consciousness is one of the criteria, even to define what means for someone to be deemed as dead, right? Something like that. If you don't have a trace of consciousness, it would be highly unlikely that that person is still alive. So consciousness actually plays its own like a lion's share, right? So I argued that it is a property, but it's completely unique kind of property, and it's entirely grounded in subjects such as a conscious being, right? Consciousness cannot exist all by itself apart from a conscious being. So the bearer of consciousness, in my view, is a conscious being whose consciousness it is. So I don't want to get into this complicated theories, but I go in a much deeper way regarding this question. So I would like to say, yes, it is a property, but it's not a property of a normal kind, but it's a kind of a unique brand in its own right. I must warn you and your listeners, my view is not shared by so many physicalists. So many people do not accept my way of characterizing consciousness. But my view really goes hand in hand with J.P. Morland's new argument. I mean, J.P. defended this view more or less for a number of years. I think there are people who definitely think the way I think about consciousness, but I think I can say that we're minorities in this regard. And if you're a physicalist, basically, by the way, you will give a different definition of consciousness. Yeah, it's a property, it's a brain property. End of the game. That's it. We don't know how it is, but time will tell. I would like to say brain plays a great role. It's completely distinct from brain activities and brain itself. It's not even born by brain, in my view, because I'm not my brain. So now we're going to get into kind of a deeper analysis of this issue. Anyway, in a nutshell, that's how I understand consciousness as a property. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Just so that maybe some listeners want to take a look at this book. What was the name again?
JP's book is The Science of Consciousness.
Uh-huh. And the book you showed.
Yeah, I can show you. There's this book.
Uh-huh.
It came by Blackwell Wiley, and he co-authored it with his former student Brandon Rekaba. And I actually have a chapter in this book, by the way. If you happen to get this book, I talk about conservation laws and actually challenge conservation laws do not really kind of threaten the causal efficacy of souls. If souls exist, conservation laws actually do not block souls from playing a great causal role in this physical world. So I talk about a little bit quantum physics and so on, and probably it would be great. I mean, if you could have this book, for you and to your listeners.
Awesome. Yeah. And this is good because we're starting to talk a little bit about the soul. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on how does, or well, from my understanding, JP and many dualists place consciousness in the soul, right? And this is deeply related, but with the brain, but it's not reducible to the brain. Am I saying this right?
Yes. So this view is called substance dualism. I think the book that I just showed you, this book, actually is a defense of that position, that characterization that you give. According to substance dualists, of course, substance dualism comes in different races again. Everyone doesn't defend substance dualism in the same way. If you take, for example, E.J. Low's view of substance dualism, which he calls non-Cartesian substance dualism, and he has his own way of defending, substance dualism. JP has his own way of defending substance dualism, and other people, let's say William Husker, for example, has his own way of defending substance dualism. So they give different kinds of reasons, and they characterize in different ways, even if overall the conclusion is more or less the same, which means I am not entirely a physical being. There is something non-physical about me, about my nature, and so on. So according to JP's view, yes, the soul is the bearer of consciousness, not the brain. JP doesn't deny the role of the brain in terms of sustaining the function of, let's say, the soul and the unity of consciousness, even if the brain is not a unifier of consciousness. The unifier of consciousness is the bearer of consciousness. If the bearer of consciousness is the soul, all your non-physical properties, mental properties, are all born by not the brain, but by the soul, the bearer of properties. If you compare JP's approach to E.J. Low's approach, E.J. Low talks about not the soul, but talks about the self. What E.J. Low says by the self is the bearer of mental properties. So E.J. Low denies that we are brains. We're not identical to our brains, nor we're not identical to our bodies, nor to the part of the body such as the brain. So E.J. Low still differs from JP by the way he actually understands what the self itself comes down to. E.J. Low is, let's say, agnostic, shall I say, or undecided whether or not you survive physical death. So he doesn't have a view on whether you survive physical death or not. But JP does have a view, and JP does believe that you survive physical death because you are essentially your soul. You're not essentially your body or your brain. And William Husker gives you how the soul actually originates in the first place, or consciousness. They originate from the brain complexity. Once they arose from the brain complexity, once they arise from the brain complexity, they have the life of their own. So you cannot reduce them back to the brain and so on. So you see, different dualists give different characterizations. The way they frame the duality of human nature is not exactly the same, even if overall there is a similarity. So yeah, the brain doesn't really bear mental properties. The non-physical self, or the soul, or the mind, if you like, bears mental properties. But brain activities are completely borne by the brain. So the brain is the bearer of physical properties. So now you can see how we're generating out of this analysis what we call substance dualism, in opposition to, let's say, physicalism. physicalists deny mental properties being distinct from brain activities. Mental properties are completely the same thing as brain activities, but they are kind of manifesting themselves at the higher level of brain function. So these are high level properties of the brain, but there's nothing to be surprised about these properties according to physicalists. Again, physicalism comes in so many different versions, and it's outrageous, like a number of 10, 20 different definitions of physicalism. The same thing is true when it comes to dualism, by the way, and we have what we call property dualism. Property dualism simply focuses on mental properties, physical properties, and only one physical bearer. Property dualists do not believe, generally speaking, in soul. They do believe that mental properties are distinct from brain properties, but both of those are borne by one single physical being, either by the body as a whole or part of the body, such as the brain.
Awesome. Yes, this is very interesting. I just wanted to ask briefly, if do you think that the spirit is something different from the soul, and or do you think that they are like essentially the same?
Okay, I think this question is extremely unsettled. It comes up more in theological domain than in philosophical domain. So probably some of your listeners might have studied theology, or you yourself might have studied, some theological kind of, you might have taken some theological courses. Let's say, for example, trichotomists and dichotomists, trichotomism and dichotomism. I don't want to sound like bombastic here when I use these technical terms. Trichotomists or trichotomism or trichotomists are people who believe that human nature is fundamentally kind of partitioned in three categories. You have the body, you have the soul, you have the spirit, right? So this comes out straight out of Pauline theology. Sometimes Paul seems to be talking about as if human nature can be partitioned in three different categories. He talks about the body, he talks about the soul, he talks about the spirit, right? Sometimes he seems to be talking about only two of those, like the body, the spirit, or the body and the soul. So theologians, for, let's say, starting with church fathers and so on, they have developed two views in theology. Some are trichotomous, some are dichotomous. Dichotomous would say, nope, soul and spirit can be used interchangeably. So we don't have to treat them independent of each other. So the soul / let's say spirit and body, those are trichotomous, right? And no. Others would say, no, that's not how we should understand, blah, blah. The Bible seems to be telling us the trichotomist theology, emphasizing that aspect of human nature, which means the spirit is one thing, the soul, one thing, and the body, one thing. So you have three distinct partitions here. Well, to be honest with you, this hasn't been decided, hasn't been resolved, right? So discussion is still going on. There are so many books, there are so many articles, and it's silly for me to even like initiate a conversation here. Oh, how should we solve this? Blah, blah. It won't work. So we shouldn't solve it. So none of us knows for sure what was in Paul's mind. What exactly is Paul's position? Let's say, just to put like in a simple way. If we were to ask him in person, we would be in a position to completely close the door once and for all on this issue, right? So we are working out of the text that's left for us, and I think intellectual humility is really important. If some people are drawn to defending trichotomism, it's fine. And others, if they get drawn to defending like trichotomism or trichotomist approach to human nature, that's fine too. But I don't think we should even die over this issue, because this issue is not only unique to theology, and philosophers and scientists have so many different views. But I must warn you and your listeners, scientists, broadly speaking, they are not interested either in the notion of soul or the spirit. And the same thing is true in philosophy. Nobody talks about the spirit. Well, when I say that, I'm excluding Christian philosophers. Christian philosophers definitely talk about these issues, if not all of them. But, you know, at least the majority are open to thinking about this issue. But yeah, this is, you know, the question that should be left still hanging over us, over our head, as opposed to saying, oh, here's the answer and case closed. I think that's not the case.
All right, thank you. So before we jump into Neuralink questions, I got a question that I think it's very important and might be used to might be used to link both topics. So would it be possible, or is it possible for, I don't know, from here to 10 or 20 years for an AI or intelligent artificial to develop consciousness?
Okay, this question is very important, an excellent question, because I think about this question literally on a daily basis, and I've given so many interviews. I write a lot, and I'm writing, and blah blah. I think, look, there is a lot of course, by the way, before I say that, I'm actually teaching the philosophy of artificial intelligence at Biola, a graduate level course I introduced. So this fall. So I'm going to teach that course. So we're going to deal with all of these issues. Let me answer this question in different ways. Let's assume, for example, let's suppose it's possible. Let's suppose AI would be as conscious as we are. But to be able to get there, guess what? What's standing in our way is we have not yet secured a proper, stable understanding of the nature of our own consciousness, okay? Human consciousness, right? So it would be not only premature, it will be highly misleading when people say that, oh, AI would be conscious like in the next 20 years or something like that. People have begun already making these outrageous claims. For example, opinion poll was collected recently whether ChatGPT is conscious or not. And the majority of people really kind of expressed, yeah, ChatGPT is conscious and so on. Look, general opinion poll is entirely irrelevant to answer this question. You can't go out and like interview people walking by minding their own business, and you can't go to the Starbucks and just, what do you think? A ChatGPT is conscious? Yeah, let's suppose you get out of 1,000 people tell you, each one of those people say, yeah, it's conscious. So you have now 100% answer out of 1,000 people said, yes, it's conscious. How is that relevant? Do you think we can make AI to be conscious by vote? Like, it's a totally irrelevant way to handle the entire issue. Totally irrelevant. Even if they deny or they affirm, it doesn't matter. So here is what I say. In the spirit of not being dogmatic or not being shooting down the very question and conversation from the get-go, let me put this as a challenge for your listeners and other people who might end up listening to this conversation after this is over. Let's first make a significant progress in understanding the nature of our own consciousness. We will get there. Okay, let's bracket that aside for now. Up to this point, any technology that has ever been created only simulates human mental activity. Nothing has passed the level of simulation or computation. Nothing. So computers do not understand anything. The simple answer is no computer is an agent, including ChatGPT. In fact, there's nothing mysterious about ChatGPT. ChatGPT simply functions on the basis of a statistical prediction. So you have a single word, and based on the training, the next word would be blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we don't have to get into how ChatGPT actually works. Anybody can Google and kind of understand that. But the point is, there is no progress in terms of establishing the semantical property is whether it's something that computers actually have an upper hand over. Computers can simulate based on the training, the training that we actually fed into the machine and so on, based on machine learning and so on, reinforce, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and so on and so forth. Look, nothing, I can confidently assert, all of these progresses that we've witnessed, which are wonderful progresses, they are nothing more than simulation. That's my view, which means mimicking, imitating, and so on. So a computer, including ChatGPT, when you interact with ChatGPT, you feel like you're conversing with a human being, and the conversation goes back and forth and so on, and the conversation is context based and so on and so forth. So it would be very easy for you to assume, oh, I'm just interacting with someone, some agent-like stuff. There's absolutely nothing. It's all about the magic of algorithm. If we get this right, to say that computers would be conscious, we have no ground to make that assertion. Why? We do not only have an impoverished understanding of the nature of our own consciousness, we haven't made any significant progress at all. So what's the point of someone simply bragging about AI would be conscious? How can you jump from simulation to semantics? Okay, what enabled you to make that jump? So for me, it's too early to say. Well, when I say too early to say, I personally don't believe that we have even a capacity to create computers to be conscious. I have actually metaphysical arguments that are available on video, and your listeners can watch my lecture on ChatGPT and other stuff, metaphysical reasons. We don't even know how consciousness arises from the brain, if it ever does arise from the brain, or if it ever did arise from the brain. There's a magic. We can talk about human embryological development, if you like, and how can you end up being conscious when two cells unite, female gamete, male gamete, and so on, replication, cell, organization, replication, and so on, structures emerge, blah, 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 blah. Look, where does this consciousness come from? Gametes are not conscious. Gametes are live cells. Cells are not conscious. So where is this phenomenon coming from when cells actually organize themselves in complicated ways, and the body parts emerge and blah, blah, and all of a sudden, literally, like, this consciousness oozes out of that? That's why it is very, very, very mysterious. Physicalists have a problem of not being honest about the difficulty that's there. And dualists they accommodate that, but it doesn't mean that dualists have solved the problem. Dualists haven't solved the problem of consciousness. I don't think they have a solution to the problem of consciousness. They are trying their best. But physicalists usually try to dismiss the problem. They kind of make it sound like it's nothing to be explored there. We don't have to worry about that. We should worry about that. There's a deep mystery right there. We can't be dismissive. If you dismiss something, it's much easier to dismiss something than to face the elephant in the room head on. I think for people who talk about this AI being conscious, especially defenders of a strong AI, I think they're absolutely misleading the rest of us. And in fact, sometimes they are delusional, in my view. First, let's work on our own human consciousness. Let's make significant progress and we will get there. You cannot make a computer to be conscious if you don't know the nature of your own consciousness. What are you talking about?
Mm.
The whole project doesn't really make sense to me.
Mm.
In saying that, I'm not dogmatic, and some people might say, like, oh, no. I'm saying we will get there. Let's first take care of the elephant in the room right here, and then we will get there. No problem. I'm not really shutting down the door. I'm just saying it's not only too early, even if I have so many doubts at the metaphysical and ontological level, but I'm not going to say, well, don't try. Absolutely, go ahead and try.
Mm.
But it is completely non-starter. Any progress that has ever been made up to this point doesn't really give us any clue as to what the nature of consciousness is. If that's the case, people who talk about AI being conscious, blah, blah, either they haven't taken time to think about the problem deeply, maybe they are not experts, maybe they haven't studied the nature of problem. They are confusing mimicry, simulation with subjective experience.
Mm.
Okay? When we talk about phenomenal consciousness, we're talking about first-person grounded, deeply personal, deeply incommunicable, private, person-based situation.
Mm.
You're not going to be an expert on my headache, can you? My doctor is not an expert on my headache experience. My doctor cannot tell me I'm faking, I'm making it up. No, that's not how you're feeling. If my doctor says that, he or she is not even qualified to treat me. The doctor can't tell me, based on my explanation, I might misdescribe my experience. Of course, a doctor is there to correct that. That's fine. But my experience, even if I misdescribe it, that's not false. That's how I have experienced it. Right? So that's why consciousness, phenomenal consciousness, is extremely difficult to wrap our mind around. But then at the same time, it is extremely the closest familiar phenomenon that we can think of. I know how it feels like for me to be in this and that state, but I have no idea what kind of property is this. You know. Anyway, sorry for talking too much.
No worry. I think that was a very important point for our listeners. So, okay, let's jump into Neuralink. I wanted to, we are running out of time, but I wanted to.
No, don't worry about time.
Okay.
You can, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I wanted to make the following question, and maybe we can divide it into 3 elements. So could you talk a little bit about what is Neuralink? I think we all are watching the videos of what this company is doing, but could you explain us a little bit of what Neuralink does? How is this related to consciousness? And what implications, if any, does this brings or has to Christians?
Good. I think this is an excellent question. So Neuralink technology is really relatively a recent technology. Elon Musk actually started it in 2016, and then many companies are doing research in their own ways and so on. And even if he's taking the lead and so on. Look, I'll put it in 2 ways, and then we'll talk about the ethical implications of this technology if it is being used in a certain way. Look, up to this point, the second person received this technology, like the Neuralink, the computer brain interface, or BCI. So it's a device that would be buried at the surface of your brain. It has got so many electrodes. Let's say 1,000. Like, I think they are talking about like 2,042 electrodes or something like that. And there are very, very fine threads. These threads are very tiny, thinner than human hair. And actually, you can't use your hand to kind of bury them inside the skull, at the surface of your skull. So you have a robot that can do precisely that kind of surgery, right? And anyway, in a nutshell, look, Neuralink is a device invented by engineers and people, neuroscientists as well, that is intended to help people who suffer from paralysis, people who are whose spinal cord is injured because of some sort of disease or because of injury, because of accident, and something like that. So what happens is people, once they lose control to move their part of their body, let's say they can't move their hands or they can't move the lower part of their body and so on and so forth. So, but their brain is very active. So neurons really fire, spikes fire inside your brain, just like any normal person. But the problem is when your spinal cord is injured, the electrical signals wouldn't really run down your spinal cord and allow you to move your hands and your limbs and so on. So if the message is not reaching to that part of the body, then even if the stuff is happening inside your brain, you're not going to be able to function. You're not going to be able to move your hands and so on. So here's a problem. Let's just start Neuralink technology as a technology intended to solve a practical problem. So the practical problem is people who are having this problem because of a stroke, because of any kind of reason, they are not able to move their limbs and hands and so on body. So they are bedridden and so on. I really think this is a lifesaver. This is a wonderful technology. This is absolutely fascinating. If you look at people who suffer from these problems, they are even talking about probably in the future, it might help even people who suffer from depression, psychotic phenomenon, for example, different kinds of mental illnesses and so on. It's absolutely wonderful. And I actually thank God for these engineers and for even Elon Musk, which is absolutely fascinating. It's a wonderful stuff. So it gets buried at the surface of your brain. That the job of electrodes is really to collect electrical spikes from the needed part of your brain. So which part is the most targeted part of your brain for this technology? For now, they are targeting the motor cortex. The motor cortex is really responsible for you to be able to move your hands and limbs and so on and so forth. So they bury it on the motor cortex, not on occipital lobe, which is responsible for vision, or parietal lobe, which is mostly implicated in sensory modalities, or for you to be able to sense things and so on, and it's not in the temporal lobe, which plays a different kind of role, but that's on a motor cortex. Okay, they bury this technology there. It has got its own battery. It functions wirelessly, and the data of the spikes, the data of brain activity, goes from this device that's buried under the surface of your skull directly to the computer. This is connected to the computer, right? You can recharge the battery wirelessly and so on. So the idea is, if you are that patient, that recipient, you can actually do what you and I as normally do on our computers by the power of thought. You can move cursors, you can text your friends, you can express your thoughts. Those will be reinterpreted by the brain activities, will be reinterpreted by this device, the device sending this to the external device, the computer. But you can do all of that. You can control your smartphone and so on. So in real time, this is happening for just in the two cases that we're witnessing right now. And I think that the research has been done on monkeys and on pigs and so on and so forth for decades, right? Look, I can say from practical point of view, Neuralink, we used to talk about this brain, brain mind interface, computer interface, and science fiction books, right? couple of decades back. Now it's becoming a reality. As we speak, from practical standpoint, I think Neuralink is really, really important. Important because put yourself in the shoes of those people who have lost control over their bodies. Put yourself in the shoes of your family members. For example, God forbid, if one of them encounters this problem, you wouldn't say that they shouldn't benefit from this technology. It would be nonsensical actually for any family member to say that. Okay, it's solving a practical problem. If it is being used in its right context for the right reason, I personally applaud for this technology and for the creators and inventors and people who are improving it. Okay. Here comes, there is a catch. Okay. Elon Musk recently is saying, not only people who have a real need only be beneficiaries of this technology, even normal people you could consider, and down the road, not now, down the road, to have this technology because they can function at the superhuman level or something like that. My answer for that would be, why? What does it mean to function as a Superman? Where would you stop? Why do I need? Let's say it like this. If I am a normal human being, thank God, like I wouldn't have my legs amputated so that I could replace it with prosthetic legs or something like that. Like, do I have any need? Well, I don't. Am I having some problem? No. But for fun of it, it's fashionable. Like, it makes no sense to me. Normal people, why would they need to have this chip planted inside their skull? For what good reason? To remember what? Like, there are so many anxieties here. Like, look, ethical implications of your own privacy. Like, first of all, why do you need to have that? To function as a super? Then what? What's the next step? Where would you stop? Are you going to, for example, moving forward, replace every single cell inside your brain? Like, philosophers have written about this. Slowly by slowly, one step at a time, if we were to replace every single organ in your body, you can still be alive because you, the person, can be sustained by, let's say, silicon-based configurated body or something like that. Well, that proposal was understood to be nothing more than science fiction, right? But now we should have a second thought about that. So the chip is now being implanted in the brains of those people who absolutely needed it for the right reason. But the rest of us, if we don't have a serious medical condition, why would I even entertain the idea of having this being implanted inside my brain? I personally would stand utterly opposed to that proposal. It's extremely, extremely dangerous. There are so many bad things that could happen. First of all, we're not even sure whether this device is safe yet, right? In the long run, we don't even know. Even this, we are happy to the recipients. Absolutely, I'm elated. I'm very happy that they are able to have this service, but we don't even know what its long-term consequence might be. Even though the technology is heavily regulated by FDA and scrutinized and so on, and utmost care and so on. But if it is for general public consumption, I think all sorts of things would happen in the future. So it would raise all sorts of ethical issues, practically unexpected consequences. And having said that, transhumanists have already proposed in 2045 a human computer, like hybrid species, should be created. You should be opening up. You should open yourself up to be a hybrid species. Most part of your body is probably like replaced by this tech devices and so on, and you can function at a higher level, you can become a superhuman, you can defeat death, and you can have this digital immortality and so on and so forth. Well, I'm not very enthusiastic about that, and I think there will be so many problems with that proposal. And I would say, while I'm so happy for people who are benefiting from this technology because of their medical condition, which is extremely difficult position to be in, organic thing is always better than man-made thing. That's a kind of a common sense judgment. Look, no matter how tasty it might be, non-organic food, you can never nutritionally compare organic food to non-organic food. I understand scientists sometimes tell us some laughable things. Oh, no, we have already confirmed, this will never do anything to your body. Who are you? Are you God? Who do you think you are to give me that assurance? It doesn't really make sense to me. Organic, like if my body is functioning the way it's functioning, if there's no serious medical condition that slows me down, that prevents me from doing my daily routines, I wouldn't need anything inserted in my body. Full stop. That's my position. No need. Oh, you can function as a superhuman. I don't want to function as a superhuman. Who is going to define for me what it means to be a super? Who are you? Are you like, what qualification do you have to really tell me and establish that now I'm functioning at a superhuman level? Is that doing things very fast? Is that what we mean by super? Look, this is the area of philosophy, and where we can come up with all sorts of problems with this, the way that people freely use this terminologies and blah, blah. But this is a discussion for another time. But I, for one, would never consider anything inserted in my body if it is not medically necessitated for me to have that kind of thing. So while I'm absolutely happy about Neuralink, I'm absolutely opposed for common people, like just for fun or something like that. They should have this, buried inside their skull. We literally don't know the long-term consequence. Even if they're, let's say, it's consequence-free, still it would create so many chaos, by the way. Let's suppose you uploaded your calculus on that chip or in some way. Okay, you go to the exam room. So what credit do you actually deserve? So you remember everything. You can do your exam very fast. So what? Are you smart? In my judgment, you're not. You haven't shown me your smartness. So you've been backed by this technology and so on. People can hack you, for example. People are hacking some cars, high-tech cars these days. They don't have to be around you to hack your car. They only have to know how your car functions and so on and so forth. The computer, the property of the computerized mechanism of your car, they can hack you. And there were incidents in this regard. So moving forward, you have this chip, and so then what? Like, how much control will you have over your own life? So what exactly is the end game, by the way? Why is this important? Like, it sometimes reminds me of Genesis chapter 11, right? People started to build that kind of stuff. Anyway, I think my answer is fair. I'm absolutely in support of this technology if it is meant to solve medical situation, and it is solving. It has started solving. Great. For fun and for other issues, for normal people, I stand opposed, and I personally don't need it. You can be smarter than me. I don't care. You can go ahead and have it, but not me. And another, by the way, this is not to be kind of cynical. How about these people who are promoting this? Why don't they have it first? Let's see them have this device buried in their brains, okay, in the brains of their own family members and so on. And let's first judge what will happen in the next 10 years in their own lives before they tell us to rush to have this planted in our brains. You see, that's another thing, right? Let's see. Let them be a laboratory guinea pigs, and then we can follow their footsteps if it's okay. So you see, you can multiply. You can actually evaluate this in different ways without literally ruling out the relevance of the technology. That's how I see Neuralink. I'm very happy. It's really solving a very practical problem. If the answer that you raised, what's this relationship to consciousness, is extremely complicated. The reason is, in fact, it's very, I'm so excited when I looked at the first person who received this Neuralink medical treatment. So they are using their thoughts, right? They're influencing how the computer is working. They send out the initiate what to do, and then the initiation is not affecting their, let's say, limbs and so on, but it's directly shooting from their brain through these gadgets directly to the computer and so on. So we talk about physicalism. Physicalists will say, oh, there's nothing, the brain is dead. Human beings are nothing but collections of brain states and blah, blah. There might be a blessing in disguise here for defenders of dualism because, well, you see, dualists have always believed that top-down causation or mental causation is a real phenomenon. For example, when I think about moving my hand right now, literally that thought, if I want to put it into practice, see, I did it. The thought and my decision to act on that thought, guess what? That's it. I did it. This is exactly what's happening for Neuralink recipients as well. They can't physically move their hands, but they are initiating this, and through the device, bypassing the spinal cord structure, shooting the message is exactly going out, and the device is interpreting, and then in real time on the screen, this magic is happening. So the power of thought. So how's physicalism is going to handle this? I mean, I'm just saying, if physicalism is the way to go, you don't know how. So there is a kind of something that you can mine, you can actually benefit from the way this technology is working. And you can actually use this to apply to debates that are happening in philosophy of mind. Okay? According to the physicalist model, can such a thing happen? According to the dualist model, can such a thing happen? Which model actually gives us a better framework to make sense of what's literally happening here between this kind of BCI, brain-computer interface? So, I'm thinking about these issues. I'm thinking about first-person perspective and so on. I'm just thinking lots of things about this issue. Yeah, consciousness. Look, thought is part of consciousness, right? So apparently there's a link. But what is the nature of this link? Again, that raises the explanatory gap problem. Neuralink doesn't actually explain how the thought is doing this magic. But we're seeing the phenomenon. Yes, we're seeing the phenomenon. But what's the connection of brain activities and my thought and the output? This is what we call explanatory gap problem, or the heart problem of consciousness, for example. The heart problem of consciousness is like, as a result of all of these things, why is it that I'm finding myself being aware of my own subjective experiences and so on? So yeah, look, we don't have an answer right now. I think this is something that we have to investigate further and think about it further. But it's a very fascinating technology that will allow us to think a lot about the mind-brain problem.
Yeah, and what it comes to my mind is J.P. Moreland once said that something that let's say makes a case for the dualists is this notion of privacy, the idea that only you can know what you are thinking of. But if through this Neuralink chip or whatever, you can think of something, and then the computer writes the thing that you are thinking of, doesn't that like pushes back Moreland's argument, or and in general some dualist arguments?
So you see, you might get that impression. So a person who is okay, the Neuralink, the way it works is this. Look, the device tries to collect the pattern of the spikes inside your brain. Let's say the motor cortex area, the neurons, population of neurons, that let's say would have fired if you had been a normal person. Let's say I'm now, if neuroscientists peer into my brain right now, if they hone on this motor cortex area while I'm moving my hands and so on and so forth, every time I make these gestures and move in a certain way, they can study the pattern of these spikes in that motor cortex area. They can have a sense of what's kind of the frequency of the same kind of neuronal activity, or the spike pattern that happens every time, let's say, I do whatever that I do physically, like move and so on. They can capture that. And based on that, they can make predictions. Okay. What might happen the next time I do that? And something like that. That's exactly what is happening in this technology at this point. But the most interesting thing is, if, for example, I start entertaining, here's the conundrum, like how human brain, like how we function. Look, when I initiate to move my limbs, I am entertaining lots of thoughts already. I'm just thinking, I'm not simply moving my hand. There are a ton of things that are happening. Let's say, I might say, I don't know, if I move my hand now, I would be happy because I can grab that object and this would happen to me, blah, blah. A lot is happening inside your mind, right? So the idea now is, can such a device pick up on all of those things and intrude into my inner being, what's happening, blah, blah. That's not what's happening here. Neuralink is not reading your mental states. Neuralink is just understanding the pattern of your brain activities and managing that, sending that information to the external device. And the most amazing thing about this technology is you are the only person who can actually confirm when you see, if you're sending a text or if you're saying something, you are the only person who can tell us, like, that's exactly what I'm thinking, that's exactly what I'm saying, that's exactly true, and so on. Still the first person perspective, this autonomy is kept intact, right? That's not being hijacked by this device, you see. But the question must not be ignored. But moving forward, as the technology gets complicated and more sharpened and more refined and so on, and can it, for example, intrude into my first person domain, this private domain, and so on? If I don't say anything, for example, if I don't really if I'm just staring at the computer and just wondering about nothing, just being utterly passive or something like that, not particularly focusing on anything, not particularly thinking about anything, on this device simply like, oh, he's wondering and he's just minding his own business, he's bored, or if the technology does that kind of stuff, like if without me intending to say something, if the technology is like reflecting on what's happening in my mind, I'm just minding my own business, blah blah, if there's a kind of a third person analysis, a third person point of view, reflection and analysis on what's happening for me at that given time, then that's a different thing. But at this point, what the technology does is only kind of focuses on the kind of, it's designed to understand spike pattern and correlate that with what the person is saying. And if you get that, if a person is trying to move his or her limbs, and if you always make sure that similar spike pattern is correlated with that, then you can predict. And actually, experts are saying they can't predict whether you will move your right hand or your left hand. Your movement goes to the right or to the left. Again, this is by way of correlation. This is not by way of intruding your inner thoughts. So, and it seems to be very successful at this point. And correlation is, as we know, neither identity nor causation. So I'm very excited about this technology, and with very serious concerns, as I have pointed out earlier, in medical context, life-saving stuff. In non-medical context, for fun and other this superhuman stuff, I'm not joining that camp for so many reasons. Maybe we can talk about this some other time. And one of which is a deeply serious ethical stuff, and a lot of ways to misuse this stuff in more harmful ways and so on. And I don't see, anyone should need this as a matter of principle if you don't have a medical condition. I think as simple as that.
Okay, that was very interesting. Okay, so the last question, I would like to bring back a little bit about the moral worries that you already listed. And I wanted to link this to maybe some social implications. So for you, it's obvious that you don't think that anyone that doesn't need this has, like, they don't have any reason to get it. But let's say that, like, very wealthy people start, like, getting this installed in their brains. Do you think that these moral implications can develop later some social implications, like making the gap between rich and poor people even larger or something like that?
100%. That goes without saying, right? So everyone is not going to be in a position to reap the benefit of this technology. Even in a medical context, it's not cheap. It's not like candy. You walk into a Walmart and pick a candy and pay and leave. It's not like that. Probably it might be made cheaper down the road for those people who absolutely need it most. I will be very happy if that happens. But in the context of, like, for fun or trendy, or we function, we just efficiency or doing things super fast and so on, all of this stuff, we really don't know when we mess up with very complicated human body. Human body is extremely complicated, and there are tons of things that we don't really fully understand, even though science has advanced immensely, thank God. Look, it not only kind of promotes the gap between haves and not haves, but I think it will be a recipe for corruption as well in so many different ways. I mean, and it can actually affect education. It affects so many aspects of our lives, because the ones that have money, enough money, they can just enjoy for whatever reason, even if they want to have it for no good reason other than, like, yeah, I have enough money, I can buy, I can have it buried in my scalp, and I can do all sorts of things. And yeah, the other people will be left behind. There's no question about that. So it socially, it absolutely, it has a damaging effect and consequence. Even if that were not the case, would we actually need it, like, as a matter of, like, principle? Like, do we need to have chips buried in our skull? I'm really not sure. I'm just thinking, like, without begging some sort of question here, like, is it even would there be intrinsically, like, bad aspect to this stuff, like intrinsically, not oh, I can do things faster or something, like intrinsically, like if there is no medical condition, why would you need it? Like, I'm not, this a common sense is speaking right now. Like, right? Some people might say, oh, we have rigorous argument. Let's put that argument for now, you know, just like common sensically, if you think about it, like, do you want to literally replace your limbs by prosthetic limbs if you don't have any problem? Like, think about that. Do you really want to replace your eyes by bionic eyes? Like, let's say you're just a normal person and you're just functioning okay. No, this is not trendy. I don't want this natural stuff. Gouge it out and just replace the bionic eye and so on. Well, okay, let me say, like, I don't want to speak to other people. I don't need it. Okay, how about that? I don't need it. That's it. So you guys go ahead and have it. Trendy, fashionable, faster, blah, blah. Go ahead and have it. Rip the consequence as well. But I don't need it if it's not medically required. So for me, I understand that many people might say, no, who are you to tell us this? I'm not telling anyone. I mean, by any means, go ahead and have it. I don't need it because I don't see a single relevance of having any desire to have that unless I am malfunctioning in some way where I'm being limited and I can no longer do what I love to do and used to do. Then yes, that's okay. Here's two phrases that I want your listeners to remember. Technology can be used either for enhancement reasons or for therapeutic reasons. So the Neuralink, people who have received, the two people who have recently received this technology, they haven't received it for enhancement reasons, for therapeutic reasons, because they needed it. They are completely, their life is stopped. So therapy is okay. Enhancement is literally for fun. Like, oh, okay, and just enhance me. I don't like my limbs. Okay, replace them. I don't want to feel exhausted. I don't want to feel tired. Just inject something in me so that I can function 24 hours without slipping. Okay, that's enhancement. Enhancement brings all sorts of ethical questions. Therapy wouldn't bring any ethical questions. Ethics is safe in therapeutic use of technology, but ethics rears its head and comes back at you roaring. What are you doing? When you do it for enhancement reasons. Enhancement is not equally like bad. Let's say if you want to have, you're losing your hair, if you want to have, you know, your scalp to be full of hair, go ahead and have it. That's okay. You know, but if you want to have your eyes to be gouged out and ears replaced and limbs replaced, that's kind of a different level of enhancement. If we can even talk about enhancement at different levels. So for me, having something inside my brain I don't think it's therapeutic if I don't need it medically, but it's more of enhancement. And I'm just not for that. So maybe everyone should decide for himself or herself. So yeah.
Yeah, I think those last points are very interesting. I think that no one is even thinking about the moral implications. You know, everybody is just amazed of what this is doing, but they are not thinking about what will happen next. They're just focused on, oh, this is very good, like for people, but they are not thinking of what will happen next, because you know human beings are like just crazy people, and anything can happen later.
What is like important for us to remember is that I don't think we should always cave in. Cave in, by that I mean give in. Like look, the companies are making money, right? They are inventing things. They are benefiting. They are using their intellectual prowess and faculties. They're always making progress, right? Consumers must be critical enough. Do I need this?
Mm.
If I do need it, why? They don't need this because of this. Our job is not simply passively respond. Okay, iPhone 10 model came. Oh, I have to buy. Oh, okay, 15 came. I have to buy. Look, you shouldn't be passive responder always. Use your faculties, use your mind, and you need to have your own personal life principle. You don't need everything. You don't need to amass everything that comes your way. You don't have to give priority for everything at equal level. So that's the problem on our part. You see, we don't ask questions. We don't use our mind. Our job is passively respond. Why? Because we're social animals. We want to do what everybody does. Like you are naturally like set to imitate other people. Like, oh, all of my friends are having this, so I must have it. Even when I'm not in a position to have it, I must borrow money. I must put myself in debt. I don't care. So everyone is having that. Why would I need to do that? I have to live within my own means. I don't want to give my life to be dictated by my own closest friends. I don't. I respect my friends. I help them. I am always there for them. But I will never give my life's key to my friends so that they would be in the driver's seat. And I'm always like being, driven wherever they want to drive me. No, you need to have your own life principle. You don't have to do everything that everybody does. You only have to do what is necessary and what's appropriate, and if you are within your own means. So I think, generally speaking, that's our problem. I've known some people who plunged themselves in serious debt because they want to be like their friends. They want to have what their friends have. They want to be trendy and so on. Like I always tease myself, my friends tease me. This is my phone.
Yeah.
Many people think like, yo, you can't live without the smartphone, or you can't live without if you don't have Facebook, Twitter, blah, blah, your life is not worth living. Oh, well, my life is supremely worth living. I read like crazy. I literally devour books. I write a lot and I enjoy. I'm not going to have 10 different platforms where I can crucify myself. Does that mean everyone should have this kind of fun? No, I'm not speaking for other people. I'm speaking for myself. It is possible to literally live without doing what the majority of people do. Here is one example. I don't have a smartphone, not because I don't have money. I can have any smartphone that anyone has. I don't need it. So I have my own life principle. I'm not going to let a smartphone, that time I spend on it, to hijack the things that I most that are most close to my heart. I don't have time. So it is possible to go against the tide if you have that discipline. I'm not saying that in terms of like portraying myself as if I'm unique, not in that sense, but just as an example. And many people have like, when they talk to me, automatically they assume I have a smartphone. Automatically. And you can use Q&A card and you can just Google. They all immediately assume that. Why? Because everybody has a smartphone these days. So you must have one. Well, no, not necessarily. I don't have a smartphone, and this helps me to call and text, and that's it. So the example, I only use this literally as a very simple example. You are the one and the only person who should decide what is important to your life and what's not important to your life. What's preferable to your life, what is central to your life. So therefore, in the case of technology, the same thing. If people go ahead and have these chips planted in their brains in the future, let's say all of your friends do that, it doesn't mean you have to do that. Literally, it doesn't mean you have to do that. If they get disappointed because of that, I think you should have a principle. That will be another topic for me. Like I love you guys, and literally I can do everything. But doesn't mean I have to 100% surrender my own principles to another people. So I think I think about technology and its application a lot. So I'm a bit passionate today, right? So I'm always passionate about these issues. Not in the spirit of literally like asking people to drop everything. No, I use technology. This is part of technology. I have my computer right now, Zoom, great. Thank God. I mean, it's wonderful. Technology is absolutely wonderful, fabulous. But there are extremes to everything, right? There are extremes to everything. On extremes, I think we need to have a principle. I don't think anyone can force and twist our arm and make us do the things that we have no desire to do, or we don't see any need to do. So I think that's a kind of a very, I believe it's a modest response. So it's not an extremist stance by any means. So that's how I handle things. Yeah.
All right. So thank you, Dr. Guta. This has been an amazing talk. I think that our listeners have a lot to think about. We went through consciousness and the soul and Neuralink and even the moral implications. So it was a very fascinating talk. I wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.